My parents favored my sister and missed my milestones for her events, so I didn't tell them about my wedding. Now they're facing public shame and divorce. I am 27 years old, male, and have a younger sister. My sister Lisa is now 21 years old. She's always been a spoiled brat and a daddy's girl, expecting everyone to cater to her. Ever since she was born, my parents doted on her like she was some kind of princess. She doesn't have any special needs or anything, she's just always been their favorite. From the moment she came along, it was like I stopped existing. My mom, 50 years old, especially changed. She became obsessed with Lisa and treated me like an afterthought. My dad is 50 years old. Still showed me some love, but he was always too much of a coward to stand up to my mom. The only person who ever had my back was my grandpa, 76M. He never liked the way my parents treated me and always called them out on it. He didn't care much for Lisa either, and we bonded over how much I reminded him of his late wife, my grandma. But since he lives on the other side of the country, I didn't get to see him often. Lisa knew our mom favored her, as she made sure to rub it in my face. We were always at odds because of her entitlement and bratty behavior. I can't even count how many times I got in trouble because of her or how often she framed me for things she did. The only thing she was ever good at was sports, specifically football. She ended up getting a scholarship to a nice college out of state. Meanwhile, my parents never spent a dime on my education. They told me my college fund had been used after a fire damaged the house, but I found out later that they gave the money to Lisa so she could buy a car and eventually a house when she started college. I went to a public university, and that's where I met Jenna, my now wife. She was the first person I really connected with. We became best friends before we started dating, and thanks to her, I finally moved out of my parents' house. Both Jenna and I are successful in our careers now, earning good salaries, and life is pretty great. A year ago, Jenna proposed to me. Yes, she did the proposing, and I said yes. We're private people, so we didn't make a big deal about it on social media or anything like that. I told my parents, but they barely reacted. It was like they didn't even hear me. We decided to have a small, intimate wedding with our closest friends and family. Jenna convinced me to invite my parents and Lisa, so I sent them invitations. They never responded. Every time I went to visit and tried to bring up the wedding, my mom would interrupt me to brag about Lisa's accomplishments. I eventually had enough and told my mom there was an important event I was planning that they couldn't miss. She didn't even ask what it was and just said, "Sorry, we can't come. Lisa has a big game that day and we have to be there." This didn't surprise me at all. They missed my high school and college graduations for things related to Lisa, so I didn't expect them to care about my wedding. At that point, I decided not to bother telling them it was my wedding they were going to miss. I just let it go. A few weeks ago, Jenna and I got married. It was perfect. My family, Jenna's family, and all our friends were there. My grandpa was proud to give me away, and we had an amazing time. Some relatives asked why my parents went there, and I told them the truth: they had Lisa's game to attend. My grandpa was furious, but he kept it together for the day. After the wedding, Jenna and I went on our honeymoon. We turned off our phones and didn't look at them until we got back. When I turned my phone on, it exploded with notifications. Most of them were from my mom and Lisa, calling me all kinds of nasty names. Apparently, one of my aunts posted pictures of the wedding on Facebook, and the post went viral. It included a not-so-subtle dig at my parents for missing the wedding, and people in their community started shaming them for how they treated me. To make things worse for them, my grandpa personally visited my parents and tore into my dad for letting my mom control everything. My dad, who had always been passive, finally broke down. He's now threatening to divorce my mom unless she makes it up to me. My mom, meanwhile, has been blowing up my phone first with angry, insulting messages, and now with messages full of apologies and guilt trips. She's begging for forgiveness, but I'm not sure it's genuine. My dad's messages, on the other hand, seem full of regret and sadness. Now my family is divided. Most of my relatives are on my side, but some of my mom's sisters are blaming me for not telling her about the wedding. They're saying I hurt her by keeping it a secret. My best friends and Jenna are telling me to ignore them, but I'm not sure how to handle the situation. My mom's side of the family is pressuring me to forgive her, while my dad seems ready to leave her over all of this. I was overwhelmed and crying because of my family's harassment, and though no one is forced to believe my story, a little decency would be appreciated. Before I dive into the update, let me clarify a few things. 1. The wedding invitation clearly stated it was a wedding. There are no excuses for anyone to claim otherwise. 2. My maternal side of the family didn't attend the wedding. Some were busy, while others just made excuses and sent gifts instead. 3. My mother's idea of atonement was sending me an apology via text. Now, onto the update. After all the drama, I took a few days off from Reddit to clear my head and had a long conversation with Lucas, my husband. He's been my rock, and I honestly don't think I could love him more than I already do. We discussed how to move forward, and for the first time, he gave me a much-needed reality check about my parents. He pointed out how unhealthy it was that I kept in contact with them and couldn't bring myself to fully cut them off. It was a brutal truth, but it hit me hard. Deep down, I had always sought their approval. Even after everything, I still wanted them to acknowledge me. I finally decided enough was enough. I realized that love was conditional, like a drug. They could be warm and caring, but they always flipped the switch and became toxic. The small bits of love they threw my way were just enough to keep me hooked, always yearning for more. I knew this was destroying me. So I made the decision to start therapy and to cut contact with anyone who had played a part in this toxic situation. This time, I was going no contact for good. After reflecting on my feelings, I reached out to my dad and told him that if he wanted to talk, I would meet him along with my mom and brother in a neutral location. He agreed, and the next day, we met at a park. My father's siblings came along as well, probably to do damage control. My dad looked distraught, like he had been crying for hours. My mom, on the other hand, seemed more angry and embarrassed than anything else, and my brother looked annoyed. I calmly explained to them how their actions favoring my brother over me, neglecting me, and being emotionally abusive had hurt me deeply over the years. I told them I had decided that I no longer wanted contact with them. When I asked why they had treated me so badly, they couldn't give me a straight answer. My dad kept apologizing through tears, but he had no explanation, and my uncle scolded him for being so weak. My mom, after sitting there silently, finally admitted that she just didn't like me. It was plain and simple for her. As for my brother, he said he enjoyed the attention he got from making me miserable, like it was some kind of game. Then, the truth about the wedding invitation came out. My parents never actually received it because my brother had ripped it up. He also deleted the messages I had sent them, so they never saw my texts. I was completely heartbroken. When I confronted Mike about why he had done it, he just shrugged and said that my wedding wasn't as important as the other plans they had. I was devastated. Lucas nearly punched him, but I stopped him just in time. Shockingly, my parents were furious with Mike and started reprimanding him. He threw a tantrum, crying crocodile tears, and while part of me was satisfied to see him finally getting some consequences, my mum still tried to brush it all off, saying it was just a misunderstanding. That's when I lost it. I told her that just because Mike had trashed the invite didn't erase all the years of neglect. They should have known I was having a wedding, and they could have asked about it if they cared. My mom's response? She said, "I heard you talking about a wedding, but I thought you were being delusional and just wanted attention." She actually believed that Lucas didn't like me and would never marry me. I was livid. Then I learned another lie. My parents had told me they missed my wedding because Mike had a football game, but it turns out they had gone to Disneyland instead. They had lied to me again. At that point, I couldn't hold back anymore. I stood up and let them have it. I told my dad he was a weak, sad man who couldn't stand up for his own kids unless my mom gave him permission. I called my brother a pathetic excuse for a man who would never accomplish anything in life and would always lie as a leech. And to my mom, I said she was a narcissistic, pathetic woman who didn't even deserve to be addressed, and not even God could help her because she was too rotten. Harsh, I know, but I had reached my breaking point. My mom tried to scream at me halfway through my rant, but I told her to shut up and sit down for once in her life. I don't remember much after that because I was so furious, but I do recall spitting out that I was disowning all of them and they should think very carefully before ever trying to contact me again. I grabbed my things and left with Lucas, Anna, and Francis, leaving my parents and brother to face my aunt and uncle's judgment. On the drive home, the reality of everything hit me, and I had a panic attack. Lucas was driving, so Anna helped me calm down until we pulled over and I could breathe again. When we got home, I collapsed on the bed and slept for hours. At one point, I considered posting everything on Facebook to expose them, but because of my career, I couldn't risk putting my name and face out there like that. Instead, I did something better. I gathered all of the nasty messages my mom had sent me over the years, put them into a folder, and sent it to the head of her church. Her church is a tight-knit, extremely judgmental community, and being shunned there is like a social death sentence. As expected, the scandal spread like wildfire, and my mom's reputation in the church was ruined. It even spread to the rest of the small town. I also found other hurtful messages from my extended family, so I decided to block them all. I told them they were no longer a part of my life and they could say whatever they wanted. I simply didn't care anymore. I blocked my parents, my brother, and even my grandparents on everything. My dad sent me a long message apologizing for being too weak to stand up to my mom and saying he was going to divorce her. He wanted to rebuild a relationship with me, but I told him I didn't want to see or forgive him. He said he'd try to win me back, but I blocked him anyway. His apology felt insincere, like he was just throwing my mom under the bus to get out of the situation. My brother sent more taunting messages, and I blocked him too. Since then, things have been quiet. Lucas has been spoiling me rotten, and I'm starting therapy soon to work through everything. My grandpa, who has been incredibly supportive, decided to stay with us for a while to stick by my side. Despite everything, I'm surrounded by people who genuinely care about me, and for the first time in a long while, I feel hopeful about the future.